Hi, this is Phil Cooke, and welcome to the Phil Cooke Podcast. Today we're interviewing Steve Woodworth, who's written a fascinating book, Lost in Transition, Lessons from the Most Disastrous and Successful Ministry Successions. You know, whether you're a pastor or ministry leader, you have to hand the baton off to somebody, and the truth is most of them go badly, at least in my experience, and I've been through some major ones over the years. And Steve's written a fantastic book that's a real guideline for how to make successions happen well. And you may not be one of those succession people. You may not be a pastor or ministry leader. Maybe you need to get a copy of this book or listen to this episode and forward it to your pastor or ministry leader or the board, maybe even better with the board, because succession is so important and we just don't do it well. Steve's figured it out. He's had an amazing career in the media, in fundraising, in marketing, and it's worth a listen to because it's going to be a great time with Steve Woodworth talking about how to make a succession happen well. Steve, thanks for being on the program. I'm excited about this new book, Lost in Transition, because it's incredibly important today. Now, you go back with a lot of different organizations, and I know you from Masterworks, which is one of the premier marketing and fundraising agencies in the Christian space out there today. But tell me a little bit about where you've come from and how you got into this whole thing with successions.
Well, so I came from World Vision, where I was VP of marketing back in the 80s and 90s. I actually started my career straight out of college there. And then I took that into Masterworks to learn or to apply what I'd learned at World Vision for other Christian organizations. And I've been doing that for over 30 years now. So I've seen a lot of organizations. I've worked with hundreds. I've seen a lot of successions. And I came to the conclusion that about half of them go badly. And a significant portion of those go really badly, which is why the subtitle mentions disastrous successions. And it doesn't have to be that way. I started to look at it a few years ago and think about it. Why are these going badly or why are they going well? And I began to see certain things that are really pretty simple and mostly common sense, but they get lost in the emotion and drama of the succession. And I just decided I don't see other resources like this out there. And Bill High, the founder of Signatory, told me, you need to write a book. And every year that you don't write it, some successions go badly that would have gone well if you had done the book. And that's when I started working on the book, when he said that.
So you talked about your 5 principles, 5 keys that make a succession work well. Can we talk a little bit about those? That was really interesting part of the book. Tell me a little bit about the 5 principles.
Yeah, I'll share them each briefly, and then you can take me back,
Sure.
and we can talk more about any of them. So the first one is boards don't know what they're doing. You know, I mean, I even say boards are clueless, and then I apologize for saying that to any board members. But they oftentimes do it even behind the curtain, you know, and feel like they can't let the staff know what's going on. It's not that it would somehow mess up the process. Or they make bad decisions. They hire people sometimes in reaction to the weaknesses of the current leader. They'll go to the other extreme. I've seen that happen a lot, where you've got somebody, especially like in homeless missions, we have a lot of those as clients, rescue missions, where there is a spectrum of people from a business-oriented person who knows how to build a team and grow an organization, but tends to stay in their office. To the other end of the spectrum is like a homeless advocate, person who's just passionate about caring for the homeless, who walks the streets. People know them, call out to them, you know, and the board of a rescue mission will often swing from one to the other, and not and that just creates havoc. So boards is number one. The problem with boards. Number 2 is culture. That culture is so important. I mentioned Edgar Sandoval at World Vision. Rich Stearns came from the corporate world. He describes his arrival at World Vision as like landing on Mars. Like, he had no idea that they expected him to be a spiritual leader as well as a business leader. And he said, you know, in the first week, somebody asked him, what's the vision that God's put on your heart for the future of World Vision? And he said, I replied, I don't even know where the men's room is yet. He said, we're going to develop a vision together. I don't have a God-given vision for the future. So I believe that the success rate, and I look back over all the successions I could remember, and I talk to people about this, and I even talked to some executive recruiters about this in the Christian space. The success rate of internal candidates is much higher than the success rate of external candidates. So where I say 50-50, it's probably like 70% of internal or 80% and 30% of external candidates are successful. So
Wow.
culture fit, that's usually why it doesn't work out. And you don't know what you're getting when you go outside. You really don't
Yeah.
know until they're there. The third thing is to respect the outgoing leader. When you, as I mentioned, like with Ted Engstrom, when you have a leader that's been successful, they've been there 20 years, 30 years, even at a church. I believe this at a church too. David Ashcraft of Lives Changed by Christ Church. He's now the president of the Global Leadership Network. He stayed at his church and he went away for a while. And I'll tell another story about him. Maybe if we get on the subject, that's kind of funny and interesting. But I've seen people that have been hurt because they weren't respected by the board or by the incoming leader, and they leave and they don't want anything to do with the organization. And when donors ask them, "What do you think of the new guy? Should I continue to support the organization?" All they have to do is give a mediocre, tepid response, and the donors can read into that and think, "Well, maybe I'm not going to continue to give." So they lose donors, and usually the board and the successor don't even think that they could have done anything to avoid it when it would have been pretty easy. So I tell some stories about that too. That's number 3, respecting the outgoing leader. Number 4 is humility. It takes humility on the part of everybody, and and I see it in myself too. There are times where I feel like I'm in a 5-year process with Brian so far, and he's the president of our company, Brian Brown, and we're doing really well together. But I also see that my identity is still sort of wrapped up in the thing that I've built here. And I think, why did Brian not include me in that meeting, or why did he make that decision without me? And here's a funny story about David Ashcraft. He's told this in public on a podcast for the Leadership Network. So I don't mind telling it, but he says that on the first Sunday when he was at church, and his successor, whom he had been grooming for 7 years, walks up on the stage and the screen says, "Jason so-and-so, lead pastor." He thought, wait a minute, I'm the lead pastor. And he goes, "Oh, wait, no, I'm not." Now, did he earn that? Was he really ready? Is it time for him to be the senior pastor here or not? And he said, he then his successor started talking about this project that they were going to do that was a big new venture for the church. And he kept waiting for him to mention his name because he was thinking, I raised the money for that. Is he going to give me credit for that? And at the end of that one service, he realized, I'm sorry, God, I'm being really stupid. I've got to get away for a little while to get my head clear. So he went to one of their satellite churches for, I can't remember how long, but I think for a few months, and then came back. And now he's back in the church and he's loving it. And and he preaches sometimes to give the new senior pastor, a break. So that humility has to work all the way around, because there are young leaders that come in, and I've heard many stories of young leaders that come in and they have the attitude of, I don't need you. And it's my time now. It's your time's done. And so kind of subtly, pushing the older leader out, and that doesn't go well either. And the staff don't like that either. Usually the staff for a successful leader who's graduated out because of their age, the staff still has a lot of affection for them. And if the incoming leader doesn't respect that takes some momentum out of the organization. And the last principle is communication. Just frequent. You cannot over communicate. The outgoing leader, the board, boards, I said they do this behind a curtain. So they and that just engenders fear. The staff wonder, who are they going to pick and how bad is this going to be? And sometimes some of the best people leave. They get a job opportunity and they think, I have no idea what the future of this organization is, so I'm going to take this opportunity, where they might have stayed if they just were kept in the loop and knew what the board was thinking and the kind of people they were talking to. And so communication all the way around. Brian and I keep really short accounts. I'll tell one quick story. Brian and I were at our attorneys one day, year ago, 2 years ago, so well into the succession. Now I'd already announced him as my successor and put him in position to be the president of the organization while I took the CEO title. And we were at the attorney's office and he said, what would happen if we just stopped paying on that? Like, we just decided that this was never fair and we're not going to pay anymore. And the attorney says, well, you got a contract and it was signed in good faith on both sides. So you'd get sued and you'd have to pay.
Yeah.
And Brian says, okay. And I went home and I started noodling on that. And it started to bug me and it started to gnaw at me more and more. Like, I've never walked away from a contract. I could see going back to the other party and saying, we don't think this was fair and it's not worked out for us. Can we renegotiate it? But would Brian literally just try to walk away from a contract and say, so sue me? And it bugged me so much that I lost some sleep that night. And first thing in the morning, I called Brian and I told him all that. And he said, okay, Steve, first of all, that was a poor choice of words. I didn't really intend to walk away from the contract. It was like an intellectual exercise. But secondly, he said, isn't it cool that we're having this discussion within less than 24 hours? But better yet is you should have called me last night when you realized it was bugging you. I don't care if it was 11 o'clock at night. I don't want you to ever lose sleep over something like that. So
That's good.
Let's keep that tight of accounts. In fact, he coined the phrase, let's have no daylight between us.
That's good.
And it's really been good. Yeah.
Well, that's a good 5 principles. Let's go back and talk about humility for a second. That was really interesting to me because I've been in situations where the founding pastor would keep meddling. After he turned it over to a successor, he kept meddling. In fact, I've had one situation that they burned through 4 successors just because it drove the new guy crazy. And they wouldn't put up with it after a while, and they left. And it took years to finally find. And I think it came to the point where the founder, his health was so bad, he just couldn't meddle anymore. But I think of all the lost years that cost that church because they just couldn't let go and they kept wanting to be involved. And a couple situations I've been in where I'll have the founder write a coffee table book about his life and ministry. And that gets him gone for a year, while the new guy can come in and get established. And then if we need to, take him out on a speaking tour for a while. But guys some of them have trouble, finding that balance of being available if needed, but not meddling. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, James Ackerman, the former CEO, very successful CEO of Prison Fellowship. He in my talk with him, he was a client for the whole time he was there at Prison Fellowship, and they're still a client. And so I watched what he did there. He told me leaders in general are not humble people, right? So we all have this problem, and we have to struggle with it. And it's a daily battle for humility. And if a leader's not willing to do that, it's going to cause problems. I watched one organization where the leader was very involved in choosing a successor from within who had worked there for a decade, more than a decade. And they worked together well. They had shared common values and everything. But that former leader started to feel threatened and started to question decisions, started to undermine the new leader at the board. And the board got wind of it, and they tried to talk to the older leader, tried to convince him that this is not going to go well if you continue to do this. And he got offended that the board intervened like that. So then actually laid down the law, like, okay, you have to choose between him or me. I don't think he's the right person. We made a bad decision. So it's him or me. They chose the new guy who had been there a long time. But the younger leader, they decided that it was time, and and if you're going to make us choose, we're going to choose him. And the older leader left and opened up a competing ministry, which really hurt the organization really badly. And I don't know what else you can do, Phil, if somebody won't listen to counsel of friends and recognize their own sinful nature and deal with their pride. I'd say, everybody that cares about the organization should surround that older leader and help them to see what they're doing. But if you do all that and the person still won't humble themselves, then you're going to have disaster. That's why I use the term disastrous successions on the subtitle of the book, or the most successful and most disastrous succession.
That's amazing. You also have 2 interesting phrases, gone too soon and stayed too long. And that really does apply to a lot of these kind of situations.
Yeah. I had an interesting anecdote recently, and these are the kind of things that really bless me since I've written the book. The book's been out a little over a year now. The head of a rescue mission had given notice that he was retiring, and then read my book, and then went back to the board and said, "I need 2 more years to do this right.
Wow.
I want to groom an internal person. I think I know the right person, and I've just put all that on to you guys." And I would like to stay for 2 more years. And the board said, great. And that's been a really rewarding thing to see that type of thing.
Well,
He was leaving too soon. He hadn't done all the work he needed to do to set up a legacy for himself. And somebody defined, I can't remember where I heard this, and I think it's quoted and attributed in the book, but I think it was maybe John Maxwell. The legacy is what you leave when you're gone. Is it better than how it was when you were there? And Jim Collins has a similar phrase in one of his books too, that the mark of a great leader is that the organization goes on and does even more and does even better after you're done.
wow.
And that takes a lot of humility to really want that, as opposed to want to see the organization struggle a little bit and realize how important you were. But God put us all here just for a limited time, and we have to recognize that. And especially if we're leading a lot of people. I mean, our company is not a big company, but 130 people, and a marketing agency is a complex kind of organization. And I don't have the energy that I used to have, and I recognize that. And Brian's come in and with a whole fresh wind and new ideas and a technology background. He's brought in a lot of technology to help support what we do for our clients, and all kinds of stuff that I couldn't have done. So we're way off, and our clients are way better off that I have held this loosely.
You two have been working on this for 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Is it ever too soon to start thinking about succession? I mean, what guidelines do you suggest for when we need to start tapping that next man or woman and start developing them, and how soon should we start?
I don't think there's any exact number, but I started looking for my successor when I was around 50, and I thought I would retire at 55. It's a hard business to be in. It's intense, with a lot of clients and clients coming and going. And I thought I had the right person, and I invested in them for years. And it turned out, as we grew pretty dramatically, that he was a pastoral kind of a leader, and people loved him and clients loved him. But as we grew to a certain point, we got beyond what I felt like he was able to do, and we needed somebody who had a different set of gifts. So I had made the wrong choice, and he felt it too. He agreed with me. He left and went off on a different career, decided he didn't really like this kind of business, and he's done really well on the ministry side instead of on the agency side. And so it's not too early to start looking for people and grooming people. It's a basic leader's job. I think a big part of a leader's job is to mentor people. And so you should be mentoring with that in mind, like, are any of these people capable of succeeding me someday? And if not, by the time you're 50, you should be trying to find somebody. And even if you want to work till you're 80, you still need somebody else to take over as your energy wanes and as you're not able to keep up with all the latest technology and everything, and current cultural drifts, and you're doing that as your core work. So you're maybe different than most people, but it's very hard for me to do enough reading to stay caught up with the latest new social media, and all that kind of stuff. And I myself am not a big social media person. So we need somebody who really understands that world, because that's where the world of marketing is going. It's too late if you don't have time to groom somebody internally. That it's not too early, especially if you make friends with the person. And the best successions are where people become really good friends, like Brian and I, where we really want the best for each other. He wants me not to go because I don't want to leave. I don't want to just go play golf, for the rest of my life. When my clients are all ministries, that's what I want to do to help. My church is very supportive too, that this is my ministry, and they rather see me, my pastor rather see me doing this than helping at the church. And so that's really helpful in these kind of transitions. It's too late if you're just burned out and you've got to go and you're like out of gas and I can't do this for another year and you don't have
Yeah.
a candidate inside.
Now, I've seen some situations with pastors where the incoming pastor, the new guy, just after a while was chomping at the bit to go, and the senior pastor just wasn't quite ready. And after a few years, the new guy finally got frustrated and took another opportunity because he kind of felt like, I'm never going to get a chance at this. The pastor's never going to step down. So is that a concern as well? I mean, do we have to find that balance of,
Yeah,
spending the
it's
time grooming, but not defeating his potential?
There's no perfect way to do this. We ultimately have to trust God, right, and pray, and
Yeah.
there's that whole spiritual discernment side of everything. And sometimes I think it's for the good of the kingdom when people do move on and do something else. There's a lot of great leaders that have come out of World Vision and done all kinds of different things and led different organizations, for example. And they didn't move up to the top of World Vision. They went off and I can't remember, there's dozens and dozens of CEOs just in my lifetime that have come out of World Vision and gone on to lead other organizations, but never led World Vision. So I think in a case like that, in my own church, I was asked to lead a succession team for our pastor. And one of the pastors there felt like he really, really wanted it. And if he didn't get it, he was going to go somewhere else as the lead pastor. And turned out that our pastor, the senior pastor that had asked me to lead this team,
Yeah.
he was about to turn 65. I think he was 63 at the time. And I had this, I talk about this in the book. I think that 65 is an artificial construct of American culture.
Totally.
Yeah. It's based on Social Security, and that age was set at a time when most people didn't live to 65.
Yeah.
And yet it's been baked into our minds. So I thought maybe you or the board are misunderstanding the fact that you're going to turn 65 means you should move on. He was running marathons. He's super healthy, and the church was thriving. So the first thing I did was said, I want to have a meeting with the board with you out of the room for the first part of the meeting. And I asked them, who wants Tom to retire? And nobody raised their hand. And I said, now, seriously, be honest with me. If you think it's time for Tom to be planning his succession and retirement, then let me know. And nobody did. And so I had Tom come back in and I said, Tom, nobody wants you to retire. And he said, really? I mean, just was shocked. And so he put it on hold and he continued to work there. And we had taken on a local Christian school system that was going to be shut down. And it was his vision, and he was putting the energy into that and building that. And it all worked out. The guy who thought that he wanted to be senior pastor or he would leave is still there and is not the senior pastor. And Tom has retired, semi-retired.
Yeah.
He's still there helping the younger pastor. And it's just God just sort of orchestrated it all together. So I know that's a rare story, but it's a great example.
Well, I've encountered ministries where it was a mandatory 65 retirement, and I was seeing leaders that were just really coming into their own and at the peak of their leadership skills, and they're forced to retire and go to work for somebody else. They're not ready to go hit the golf course either, and they'll go work with another ministry or another nonprofit. And you're onto something there. That's just really, really, that's good. Really good. No good. Well, it is interesting though. You use the phrase, and I like this, every leader is an interim leader. And the truth is nobody lasts forever. We're all an interim, no matter how long we've been. And some leaders have been there for 20 years. We need to get that into our head more. Tell me a little bit about more what you mean by that.
Well, even the greatest leaders in the Bible, David, Moses, they had their time, and their time was limited. And as we look back now, it looks like a short period of time. David was king for 40 years, so it seemed like a long time, I'm sure. And he had a lot of wars and all that, and palace intrigue and everything. But in the long scope of things, God has a plan, and we have a purpose for our time, and we look to Him to help us fulfill our purpose. and fulfill his plan for us. But we need to hold it lightly, because we're not going to live forever in this body on this earth. And if we want to do the best that we possibly can with our time and talents, then we've got to be thinking about the next generation and being stewarding our legacy to the success of the next generation.
Let me ask you this: is it possible to do a succession without drama? I mean, or put it this way: what's the single most important thing people need to remember to make sure their succession goes really, really well? I know there's probably a lot of things, but are there 1, 2, 3 that stand out?
I think probably humility is the number one factor. Is having the humility to realize that your time is limited, and therefore being focused on that over a long period of time, looking for the people in your organization who could potentially succeed you and investing in them, knowing that at some point he or she must increase and I must decrease, and having the humility to manage that. Phil, it's just really a very emotionally charged situation. When you start to get serious about it, and okay, I started to hand over responsibility to Brian. I made him COO, and he just far exceeded my expectations every month. He started saying to me, and I said, I have open hands, Brian. If you see me doing something that you think you can do, take it off my plate, let me know, and I'll let you try it. And he started saying, well, I think I can do that. And I was like, okay. And I thought, I don't think so, but let's see. And he would succeed at it, like one thing after another. And I started to feel like he's going to come to me in a year and say, I don't need you and I can't afford you anymore. And so I opened up to him about that. I said, Brian, I have this phobic fear that you're going to come and say, you don't need me. And I'm going to feel like, what else am I going to do? And he said, I will never do that to you. You've been so good to me. You've been so generous to me. I will let you continue to contribute here as long as you're able. And I said, okay, as long as you promise me that if I'm embarrassing you in front of clients, you'll tell me. So I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of communication that we have. But it takes a lot of humility. It takes humility on his part to not want to be the only guy shining and known in the industry and so on. It takes humility on my part to continue to give things over to him and be content to let him do it his way. But sometimes I don't agree. I keep the communication just strictly between him and me. When I think he's making a decision, or when I have input on a decision and he doesn't go that way, I keep our disagreement to myself. And he's learned good lessons that way too. And I think it's humility all the way around is just so important, and it's rare. It is, like James Ackerman said, it's not natural, especially for a leader, to be humble. You have to work at it every single day.
That's amazing. The book is so important. Lost in Transition. And I love the subtitle, Lessons from the Most Disastrous and Successful Ministry Successions. It's a really great book that people need to be reading. Successions happen everywhere all the time. And like I say, I'm a media producer. I'm not a leadership expert, but I've just been involved because I've been helping them tell their story to the world. And naturally you get pulled into doing those succession videos and the anniversary videos. And there's a lot of projects. And so I've seen good ones, I've seen terrible ones, and there's just not a lot of resources out there to help leaders understand how to do it well. And I would say it's a psychological shift, because you're going from being the leader, the pastor, the CEO, whatever, to just being one of the regular team. And even though you may be an advisor, coach, consultant, however, you end up out there, it is a different mind shift. And so it's a hard one for a lot of leaders to take, particularly if they've been doing this for a really long time. So I think the book is incredibly, incredibly important. Thank you for writing it. And we just need to get it out there in a bigger way. How is the reception? Have people been really benefiting from it?
Yeah, I've had probably few calls a month from people who say, "Would you talk to my board chair? I read your book. Good. I think they're not going about it right." I've had people buy it for all their board members, and like I said, I've had people who have said, "I've changed my plans based on your book."
That's
I have
great.
one organization, the most gratifying one so far, was a CEO founder came to me and through our team and said, I think the board is going about this all wrong and I'm getting really offended. They're telling me that when my time is done, it's done and I need to leave. And I've groomed an internal candidate and they don't think that's the right person. And I don't think they are given a fair shot. And then she said, would you talk to my board chair? So I did. And the board chair said, I agree with everything that she's saying, but I don't really know what to do. He said, I've always seen my role as to facilitate the board, but maybe I need to lead in this situation. And I said, you're headed for a cliff. I mean, this organization is going to go off a cliff. If you lose the founder and the already ready prepared successor, this place is going to fall apart. And so he did. He led, he brought the board together. He said, we got to give this person a chance. We got to keep the founder around for a year or two at least and see how it goes. And if she's meddling, we can tell her it's not working because you're meddling. And that everybody's happy. I just had lunch with the board chair, the founder, and the successor. The board chose a successor unanimously that she wanted. And everybody's like smiling. I've got a photo on my phone of me having lunch with them and everybody's smiling.
That's good. See, you got to get this book. It's so important. Well, Steve, thank you so much for being on. This is fantastic. And we'll be talking about this again because I just think it's such an incredible book whose time has come. So thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate you.
Well, I'm incredibly grateful to Steve. It's just such an important book, Lost in Transition. You need to get your hands on it and share it. Like I said earlier, share it with the board at your church or ministry. Share it with the leaders you know, because successions can make or break an organization. And so many, in my experience, have done it poorly. And so I think it's just a great reminder of how important passing the baton is to a new generation leader. So thanks for tuning in. Check me out at philcooke.com, my blog. Remember, it's Cooke. And check other podcast episodes we've done because you can search around and find issues that really focus on areas you're struggling with. Same with my blog. You can search for topics on my blog, and it's really amazing. And take the time to subscribe to my newsletter. It's essentially the top 5 blog posts of the week. I email it to you once a week. You don't have to go to my blog. They're right there. And it's an easy way to get the kind of information that you wrestle with constantly. If you're in the media business, in the ministry business, whatever you're in, this is so important. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being a part of this community. I really am grateful to you for tuning in every week. And remember the Influence Lab, our nonprofit, where we're out traveling around the world trying to train Christians all over the world to use media to share the gospel more effectively. If you have a heart for evangelism and missions, we need to switch out that idea that missions is just about geographical boundaries and start thinking about missions in terms of digital boundaries, because we need to reach the digital space with the gospel. Help us do that. Your donation can really make a difference in helping us send professional trained people internationally to help raise up a new generation of people around the world to use media, social media, video to share the gospel. So thanks for being a part of it. Thanks for helping us, and we'll see you next time.